Well, good evening. Welcome to New Life Apologetics. I'm Jeremy Bushnell.
I'm Tanner Dean.
And I'm Stephen Bennett.
And tonight we're going to talk to you about how to give a response when somebody brings up the issue of homosexuality. This is a very sensitive issue. We want to be kind in our response. Yet most Christians are taken off guard, like, I don't know how to respond to this. I don't want to be offensive. I don't want to lose a friend. And so we'll talk about some of the best ways to give a defense to that question. When I think about that, I think of Daigle, Lauren Daigle had a huge platform. Platinum? Was she like a platinum artist?
I think so, platinum or gold.
And she was on the Ellen show. I think she was on Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon, one of the Jimmys, and just had a great following, and ended up going on a talk show, and the person, or it was radio, and the person interviewing her. We'll show you a clip of the person who interviewed her and the question she had to face.
Do you feel that homosexuality is a sin?
You know what? I can't honestly answer on that. I have too many people that I love that they are homosexual. I don't know. I can't say one way or the other. I'm not God. So when people ask questions like that, that's what my go-to is. I just say read the Bible and find out for yourself. And when you find out, let me know, because I'm learning too.
So a couple of things that she mentioned is that she doesn't know. That's up to God to give that answer. What are your guys' responses or thoughts on that at first?
I mean, immediately I think that the biggest problem is maybe taking an indifferent stance. Because not only do people not know how you feel about the issue, and now they're going to assume, but you're almost letting that sort of speak for you.
Right. I was listening to Ravi Zacharias' podcast today, and one of the things he mentioned is there was a political leader. He didn't name a name, but the political leader was asked this question, and the person's response was, well, if I answer one way, people are going to dislike my answer. If I answer another way, people are going to dislike my answer. So I'm just not going to answer. And Ravi Zacharias pointed out, well, what about the people who don't like the fact that you refuse to answer? Like either way, You're still in a situation. Like if you don't want to offend somebody, you're going to offend the other person. Like somebody's going to be offended either way. Even taking a non-stance. What about somebody who says, what a coward? Stand up and give an answer. You're still offending somebody one way or the other.
And right off the bat, too, you could tell she was pretty nervous about the whole conversation there because it sounded like she didn't even know what to say. Mm-hmm. So she said the first thing that came to her mind.
Yeah. I think all of us would be, I know if I were in that situation, I'd be very nervous too.
Sure.
I think this idea of practicing and having prepared an answer is one thing, but I think being in that situation, I mean, thank God I don't have that huge of a platform. One thing I wanted to read really quick, this book, Out of the Salt Shaker and Into the World, Evangelism as a Way of Life. It's by Rebecca Manley Pippert. But one of the things she says in here, it's easy to agree about how evangelism is done poorly. All right, we can all agree. Lauren Daigle, you did not give a very good answer. But how pleased is God going to be when He asks us what we have done with our lives, and we reel off everything that we didn't do? At the end of the day, when we're in eternity and we have to give an answer to God, are we going to say, "Well, I didn't have to face this situation. I didn't have to do this. I stayed away from the public eye." I want to give credit to Lauren Daigle that she is taking the gospel in one fashion. At least she is going out into the world. She's not afraid.
Sure.
She's not afraid to go on Ellen. She's not afraid to go, in front of millions of people and say, "I'm going to sing about Jesus." In one area, I want to say, but Lauren Daigle, if you're watching this, well done. Thank you for using your platform.
Right. We're not criticizing Lauren Daigle for, the way she's presenting the gospel or how she's sharing it, rather than we're just kind of focusing on this one situation. She's doing a great job presenting the gospel with the platform she has and with her talents. Mm-hmm. We're just focusing on this situation.
Yes. And even focusing on this situation, we don't want to be negative. We want to be helpful. We want to be encouraging and helpful. So the one area I kind of want to bring out is if somebody asks you that question, your first response should be a question. And we see this all throughout the Gospels. Jesus, when he's confronted by the Pharisees, he usually flips around and asks a question. So if somebody were to ask you, what is your view on homosexuality? Your first response should be, why do you ask? And then find out what they have to say. Well, I ask because, ... If somebody is asking sincerely, what if somebody is struggling with homosexuality and they want to know more about God and they are really interested in knowing about Jesus and they're being sincere, like, I really want to know. It's important to know if they're being sincere or if what I almost feel like in this radio interview, in this case, he probably was just trying to throw her under the bus and catch her off guard. So by asking, why do you ask? Then that puts the ball back in their court to give a response.
Right. And not only that, but that influences your, I guess, tactic to, not that you want to change your, the truth of the subject or how you feel about it, but rather that gives you a little bit extra tactfulness approaching that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, speaking of tactfulness and tactics, I actually learned from the book Tactics, which is by Gregory Kokel. I really recommend the book. He says, what do you mean by that? How do you come to that conclusion? Asking questions is, and actually if you're a good listener, then people will appreciate the fact that you are willing to listen. So we should ask questions just for the sake of listening to the person. But he says in that book, on the issue of homosexuality, another question could be, do you consider yourself to be a tolerant person? Well, then what are Christians always being referred to as being intolerant, homophobics, bigots. Yeah. So if you ask the person, are you a tolerant person? Well, then that kind of puts them on the level playing field. Well, now we both agree that we are tolerant. We both agree that we know why we're asking questions, so we're on the same page and we can work together here in a dialogue. I'm not throwing you under a bus. You're not throwing me under a bus. We now have level ground to stand on to have a conversation. Then what I would say is we'll go to 1 Peter 3, 15 through 16 is the passage that says Christ should be Lord in your lives and always be prepared to give a defense for the hope that is in you. Okay? It doesn't say always be prepared to give a proper context into the issue of homosexuality, right? So right. Lauren Daigle could have easily just said, I don't feel like answering that question, but my hope is in Jesus Christ, and this is why. She could have refused to answer the question. Always be prepared to give a defense for the hope that is in you. Now it doesn't say always be prepared to give a defense for heterosexuality. Homosexuality, in the context of 1 Peter 3, 15 through 16, homosexuality has nothing to do with that context.
Right, it's a back burner issue when talking about the grand scheme of salvation.
Yes. But I almost fear that Lauren Daigle was afraid to give a defense for the hope that was in her. Because she was caught off guard on the issue of homosexuality. Again, she's got a great platform. Kudos, we're thankful for Lauren Daigle using her platform. But because she was caught off guard, she lost her ability to give a defense for the hope that was in her. And it almost appeared as though she had no hope. Even to the point where she basically admitted, I don't read my Bible. Why do I say Lauren Daigle almost admitted, I don't read my Bible? Because in her response she said, I don't know, why don't you read the Bible, see what it says,
and then you tell me.
Yeah, and then you tell me, because we're all learning here. So, Lauren Daigle, you've got a platform, you're preaching the gospel, you're sharing good news, talking about Jesus, singing about Jesus in front of millions and millions of people, and then you say, I don't know, you should read the Bible and tell me.
Right, it's that really scary area of being extremely hypocritical, saying, well, I don't read my Bible, but you should. I don't know this about homosexuality or about sin, but you should. Mm-hmm. And that gets into, it's not about Christian imagery, but that gets into a bad image for Christians. It's not representative of Jesus or his teachings or the Bible. to just kind of be like, well, it doesn't pertain to me, but you should really learn about this.
Yep. Another issue, I think, and we'll probably talk about this in another video, and I think we talked about it in the introduction video too, is how a lot of people will separate the Old Testament from the New Testament. And so maybe Lauren Daigle's really comfortable with Jesus and singing about Jesus, but talking about homosexuality is like, well, I just leave that part of the Bible. And we want the whole Bible to be cohesive. We want everyone to know that Jesus is God, and that Jesus' story is from beginning to end. So, like I said, Jackie Hill Perry, and it's pretty profound that she says the goal for heterosexual Christians in witnessing to homosexuals should not be to turn them into heterosexuals. The goal should be to draw them closer to Jesus. Jesus said, I know my sheep hear my voice. So if we are preaching the word to homosexuals, then they are going to, if they are the sheep, they are going to hear the voice of the shepherd. And our goal should not be, oh, you're a homosexual, you should be a heterosexual. Our goal should be, hey, we all need to know Jesus. We all need to draw closer to Jesus. And for some of us, that means giving up our heterosexual sin. For some of us, that means giving up our homosexual sin. For everybody, it means giving up our sin. Now, I'm going to correct myself here really quick. That doesn't mean that you have to say, okay, I stopped sinning, now I can come to Jesus.
Right.
It means as I come to Jesus, I will desire him more and desire my sin less. You only, as human beings, we only have the capacity to hold so much. And if you go to grab for something else and there's no room to hold it, you're going to have to give something up. So in order to get more Jesus, naturally we're going to have to compensate by giving up more of our sin. And it's a gift that he gives us in doing that.
Right. And going back a step, I think some Christians who do focus on the issue of homosexuality, it's not about us as people or Christians to somehow eradicate someone else's sin. It's about showing them who Jesus is and helping them in their walk with Jesus so that they desire their sin less, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Romans 5:8 says that God shows his great love in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He didn't wait for us he didn't wait for homosexuals to say, okay, you know what? I'm straight now. Jesus died for the homosexual while they were still homosexuals. Jesus died for the thief while he was still stealing. Jesus died for the heterosexual who is sleeping around while they were still sleeping around.
Right.
It doesn't matter what the sin is. Christ didn't wait for us to give it up. He came to us, lived a life among sinners, reached out to sinners, died on a cross on behalf of sinners, was buried, and then rose again to give us new life.
Right. The message in here doesn't change based on a sin that someone's struggling with.
Right.
No matter what, Jesus' birth, life, death, resurrection, ascension was all for the same purpose, all for the same people.
Yes. Yeah. And in case we need to clarify, for the sake of the conversation, again, there's a lot of methods you can do here to give a defense for the question of what do you think about homosexuality. Another thing I would say is, well, what I think about homosexuality doesn't matter. My thoughts don't rule the world. My opinions don't rule the world. What I believe doesn't rule the world. But the Bible is clear in the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Bible is clear that homosexuality is a sin, and that it will be judged as a sin, and that homosexuals need to repent and trust in Jesus. It doesn't mean that they need to completely give up their sin automatically, immediately, but essentially they have to see their sin the way that God sees it. They have to acknowledge homosexuality is a sin, but I want to know God more. I want to be made right with God.
Right. They need to acknowledge it the same way we all have to acknowledge, we're liars and we're blasphemers.
Mm-hmm. If you really love somebody who is struggling with sin, you will tell them the truth. Paul tells the church in Ephesus that we are to speak the truth in love. You cannot say, I think homosexuality is okay, when it's not. It is a sin, but it is not the sin. It is not the only sexual sin. It is not an unforgivable sin. We need to be very clear that it is a sin that God does forgive.
It's no better or worse than any other sin any of us have committed.
If you love somebody, tell them the truth.
Yeah.
And do so in a kind and respectful manner.
If you want more of these videos, be sure to like and subscribe. And also click that little bell icon if you want to listen to us a little more.
And share.
Sure.
Share.
Sharing is caring.
See you guys next week.
Yeah. The Old Testament and the New Testament are almost separate books that don't, that represent two separate entities. Like there's the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament, or Jesus came in the New Testament, and